Hello and welcome to the long-awaited first episode of Hot Cocoa's second season, or as I like to call it, Hot Cocoa 2.0, episode 13. If you're wondering why there's no on-camera intro, if you saw episode 12, I think I mentioned that the audio doesn't really work well on my camera anymore, and it requires jiggling the cord and chanting of gremlins, so I decided it was more trouble than it was worth until I can find enough money to afford another camera. In any case, in this episode of Hot Cocoa, we'll be looking at a very useful object available in Interface Builder called Collection View, which basically allows you to create a table out of your own custom NSView objects. This is how the list view, for example, in such Twitter applications as Twitterific works. It's basically a bunch of custom NS views, one built for each tweet. So with that in mind, the first thing we're going to do is get a Twitter engine called, that's the terminal. Here it is, called MG Twitter Engine. Basically, this was created by Matt Gemmell, and it contains all of the methods for interacting with Twitter and for processing the return code, so we don't have to do that ourselves. Now, I suppose I could have introduced this when we were actually making a Twitter app, but that would have defeated the purpose of learning how to interact with web interfaces such as Twitter or Amazon or anything that has an API. Now, of course, this also requires some bit of tweaking to get set up. So I'll show you that now. The first thing we have to do is actually get the source code. It comes with a README, but the README, which is here, I don't find to be particularly helpful unless you sort of already know what you're doing. So we're going to go by this step through step and make sure we can get an actual working copy of MG Twitter Engine for our use. The first thing we need to do is open up a terminal like this. You can find that under Applications Utilities Terminal. And we want to connect to the SVN, the subversion repository that MG Twitter Engine is hosted on. If you haven't heard of Subversion before, it's basically an online version management system that allows a whole bunch of people to work on public code public to them. It doesn't have to be public to everybody, but on code where they can share, and it works out the differing versions for you, so you don't have conflicts where two people are editing the same piece of code and then you end up with two different versions and you need both of them merged. It manages that sort of thing. There's a few different things like that out there. There's Subversion, there's Git, among others. For this one, since they're using Subversion, happens to be really useful because I believe Subversion comes with OS X. I know I didn't have to install it, but I'm not quite sure how it got there. But I think it comes with OS X. If you type SVN and it says type SVN help for usage, then you have Subversion, the client, on your computer. If not, then you'll have to search for it and find some place to download it, or it may come with the development tools. In any case, if we go to the repository on here, you can actually just open this in a web browser, and you'll see there's a couple different things on here, and it's at revision 42. What we want is the MG Twitter Engine version 1.0.8, because the main branch here isn't complete, and it requires even more fiddling to get to working. So what we're going to do is go into the terminal and type svn-co, which stands for checkout, because we're checking out the code. You can also just type checkout, but CO is shorter. And then you want to type in the address, which is http://svn.cocosourcecode.com/ and then we want this here, which is what we're actually checking out, which is MG Twitter Engine -1.0.8. 8 other slash. And then you want to put where you want it to end up on your computer. In this case, we're going to save it to the desktop in the MG Twitter engine folder. And if you're wondering what this little tilde here means, that's basically a shortcut to your user folder, which is actually, if you go to your hard drive, if you never looked where your user folder is on your hard drive, it's in your if you go to the main root directory of your hard drive and then go to users and then your username, that's a shortcut to, that little tilde there. And that works across any sort of Linux-based operating system. So if we hit enter here, it should download them to the desktop. There we go. It's downloading all the files. And there we go. So we can close the terminal now. And I'll minimize this. And right here, we have the MG Twitter engine folder with all of our files in it. Now you'll notice it already comes with a project in it. Now this project is a demonstration project to show how the code works. However, if we just imported this straight into our project, it would cause conflict problems because it'll see two main.m's, the compiler will, and it'll be like, I don't know which main m you want me to load because each program can only have one main routine. So we're going to need to get rid of a few of these things before we import it, just to make it easier. Go ahead and delete the app controllers, the English.l project, which is where the nib files live, the main.m, info.plist, the Xcode project. Let's see. And you can go ahead and get rid of this as well. And so there's only the files that we actually need. Actually, I think you can get rid of this prefix here too. There. So these are only the files we actually need to get the Twitter engine up and running. Now I already have a project started here called HC Collection View. If you're unsure of how to create a new project in Xcode, we've covered that on most of the episodes, I think, that have come before this. It's just a basic Cocoa project file, new project, Cocoa window application, nothing special. And what we're going to do is drag the MD Twitter engine files up into our classes folder. Make sure this first item here is checked, copy items into destinations group folder, because what that does is instead of leaving these on our desktop, which may get deleted, may get moved, in which case our program wouldn't compile anymore, it copies them into our program's own folder where it keeps all its own files so they won't get lost. If we click add there, we can see it added the classes here, and there's all of the files that we need. Now, of course, as with all projects, pretty much, we need to create an app controller that's going to control the interface and manage other code that we may have going on. So we do that the usual way, just by going and creating a new Objective-C class, call it app controller, like so. And we're going to be doing something slightly special with this app controller. We're going to be making this an MG Twitter engine delegate. I'm not sure if we've covered delegates on the podcast before, but basically what a delegate is, it lets MG Twitter engine know that our app controller would like feedback on what it's doing. Like, it's basically saying to MG Twitter engine, hey, let me know if you have data or something, and I'll go ahead and implement these certain methods so you can call them and tell me what's going on. So in order to become the Twitter engine delegate, all we have to do is, in the little brackets here, type Twitter engine delegate, and that's it. Now we're going to need the Twitter engine itself. So we're going to need an instance of the Twitter engine. So it's of type MG Twitter engine, not delegate, just engine. And we're just going to call this generically enough Twitter engine, like so. And we're also going to need an IB outlet to the NS collection view that we're going to put on our form in a moment. And we'll just call that collection view. There we go. Now we're also going to need a single IB action and we're going to call that fetch update of type id, and it's going to send us back the sender. And in case you wondered, whatever happens to the IB outlet and actions once they compile, basically nothing. IB outlet disappears, so it acts like it's not even there. Basically, this becomes a blank space because the compiler doesn't care about it, only interface builder does, and IB action becomes void. So it's basically equivalent to typing void in there, except for it's letting interface builder know that, hey, this is something you can plug into. So now we're going to switch over. Let me copy this first so we can get the code into there. Flop over to the main file and insert that like so. Now, thankfully, the MG Twitter engine makes it ridiculously easy to connect to and talk to Twitter. Basically, all that we need to do is first instantiate the Twitter engine with our typical alloc in it, and then all we need to do is call the method getPublicTimeline. So that's really simple, and we can do that by going to, let's see, to Twitter engine. Seems spaced over. There we go. I don't know why that tabbed twice. Twitter engine equals MG Twitter engine, and then we want to alloc that, and we want to init with delegate self. So we're setting ourself to be the delegate of this Twitter engine. Close that off, and then the only other thing this does is Twitter engine get public timeline, and it's get public timeline since ID. Basically, that tells it to get the last 20 posts to the public timeline. I believe you can gather up to 100 at a time, and then you have to go into getting other pages, and it ends up being, I think, about, you can gather up to 3,000 status messages at a time with the API. Though normally you really wouldn't want to do that. So we're just going to get the 20 most recent statuses. Now, I said before that once we become the Twitter engine delegate, we have to implement some methods so that it can actually talk back to us. And if we look in the README for the Twitter engine delegate down here, these are what we have to implement. These 5 here: request succeeded, request failed, status is received, direct message is received, user info received, and there's actually one more which is in the sample code that comes with it, but not apparently on the README, which is image received, which is and miscellaneous info received. To be honest, I know what image received obviously is when you request an image. I don't know what miscellaneous info received. But just in case, we're going to implement all of them. And I basically just copied and pasted this from the sample application code. This is all from the sample application here. Stretch that out just a tad. If we go up here, oops, there we go. Statuses received, statuses for request. This is what we want to focus on. What's going to happen is when we call this get public timeline to the Twitter engine, it's going to go out, go to Twitter, grab the statuses, the 20 latest statuses, come back with process all that XML code for us, and come back with a nice NS array that we can actually do something with. And when it's done, it's going to call this method here. Now you'll notice we didn't declare these in the header, and that's because they're already declared in MG Twitter engine, which reminds me we actually have to do one more thing with the header, and that's import the MG Twitter engine. And you'll notice the Cocoa has the brackets and this one has the quotes. The main difference is if it's in brackets, then it comes from a framework. If it's in quotes, then it comes from some source code somewhere in your application classes. So now that that's there, we don't need to declare these because they're already declared in MS Twitter Engine. We're basically just implementing them and adding our own code to them so that we can make use of when it comes back with these statuses. And the only thing we need to do is set the content of the content view to statuses. That's the only code we really need to write other than the instantiating the Twitter engine and getting the public timeline. So now we can save these two files, and the rest is pretty much all in Interface Builder. So if we load up our main menu.zib here and get some of this stuff out of the way. So we have our window here. I'll minimize that. And we want a collection view right here. And if we drag this over in here, get it nice and resized, leave a little room for the button on the bottom, you'll notice that not only did it bring with it a collection view, which went a collection view, which went into the window here. There it is, the collection view. It's within a scroll view. It also came with a collection view item and just a plain NS view with nothing in it. If you hold it up, look, there's nothing in it. What we're going to do with these is the collection view item is the object representation of each of the blocks that's going to be our custom views within the collection view collection here. And this custom little blank NS view is what each of those instances of collection view item is going to look like. So let's say we want to get, we're going to need a few labels. Here we go. Say we want to get, we'll put their username. We'll put what the tweet message is. Oops. And we'll put the date and time that the message was sent. And actually for the message, we're going to need a multi-line because it won't fit in just one line. There we go. And then you want to stretch these out to however large you think the message may be. Ideally, you'd want to customize, you'd want to look at how long the message was and sort of try and determine how big this had to be, and then return that, so you could have ones of different sizes. But for the purposes of this, we're just going to try and make it large enough to fit 140 characters. Luckily, it can only be 140 characters, otherwise we'd have problems. But so there's our little NS view there. It's all lined up. Now, very much like in our core data episodes, we're going to use bindings to get the data from the array, which has, if you'll remember from the source code, which has been assigned to be the content of the collection view. We're going to get that and use bindings to put them in here. So if we go to the first label here and go to bindings, we want to bind its value, bind to, and we want to bind it to the collection view item. And we want to change the model key path to represented object. And basically represented object stands for each of the individual status updates, which comes with, if you remember what the XML data looked like from way back when we first started doing the Twitter application, this is the represented object is basically one status update along with all the information it contains. Now the username is stored at user.name, and just for now we're going to leave it as that, and I'm going to show you how you can find where the other data is and then put those into the other labels. But for now, we need to add, as always, our app controller, which is just a regular NS object. There it is. Throw that in there. Move that out of the way, and there we go. That's our app controller. And the only thing we need to link, well, there's two things we need to link. We need to link the collection view to our collection view, and we need a button so that we can call the method to fetch the updates button. There we go. Grab a button, stick it down there, close that. nifty little trick is you can change the size to small so it looks nicer. There's regular, small, and mini versions of almost every object, so you can play around with those. I'll just name that fetch and then link that back to our app controller fetch update and save that. Now you'll notice if we go to NS collection view item and look at its connections, it's already connected to the view that it created by itself. It knows that we referenced it in that binding, and it is connected to the collection view. So if we close out interface builder here and then go back to our Xcode project, oops, there we go. There's one other little quirk we need to solve with MG Twitter Engine before we can get it to run. If we run it at the moment and wait for it to compile, 20 error messages, and you'll notice all of them have to do with Lib XML. This is where the README gets a little bit confusing, because we look at the README, it says, you may wish to use the Lib XML parser rather than the NS XML parser, since Lib XML can be faster and has a smaller memory footprint. That would seem to imply that Lib XML would be optional to include in the project. However, it's not optional, because if we don't include it, then we'll get all those errors about it not being there. So what we need to do is, this says it's in user /lib/libxml2 dot dilib, which is dynamic library. There's actually a version that's easier to get to that's actually located in the SDK, because the /user folder is actually a hidden folder, and it's a little difficult to get you just by going to, what we're going to do is other frameworks. Right click, go to add existing frameworks, and it is under, it's a little bit difficult to find. If you go into your main hard drive and then go to developer, and then you want to go to SDKs, and then Mac OS X 10.5, and then user, and then lib, and then scroll all the way down to, there it is. We want the lib XML 2.2.dilib. Add that, and click add again, and you'll notice there it is. It is now included in our other frameworks, and it will be bundled with our application when we compile it. However, libxml also needs other files for it to work, and it doesn't find them automatically, which is the third step here, which is adding user /include /libxml2 as a header search path in our project, which it doesn't explain how to do, which is what I'm going to tell you how to do right now. If you go to our targets here, and this is our program, if you right click, go to get info, this is basically all of the settings for our particular build target, which is our application. If we go into the build tab here and search for header, you notice one of the options here is header search paths. This is where it wants us to add that to. So let me move this out of the way so I can see what I'm typing. Add the path there, double click here, and type in /user /include /libxml2. There we go. Hit OK. Close that. And we'll try building and going again, and hopefully we won't get any errors. And we didn't. Now, one thing to note here is if you didn't clear out those files from MG Twitter Engine that we did in the beginning, and just copied the whole folder that you got from the repository or the SVN into your project, at this point you'd still have errors about there being duplicate files. And that's because, for example, you can only have one main menu.zib file in your project. You can only have one main.m file in your project. And if the compiler sees two, it doesn't know which one to use, and so it throws an error and won't compile. So make sure you've deleted those files if you get other errors during the compile at this point. What we want to do is go to fetch, and hopefully it'll return at least the usernames. There we go. See, there's the usernames, and there's our just placeholders. There they all are. Now what I wanted to show you here And so if you don't remember what the format of the XML was, or what the title of the individual parts were, you can go into the console either by clicking this button here, or by going to Run Console. This will bring up this, which if you cut and paste the code from the, this is not the file I want to be in, which if you use the code that came with the example app that came with MG Twitter Engine, you'll notice we're dumping the statuses array out to the console here using nslog. So if we look at the console, we can see what's actually in that array and the layout here. And you'll see that we have our user, and there's the name, which is what we're pulling from. This is the user.name. Now we also want the text, which is here. This is the text of the tweet. And we want the created at. So we're going to stop the task, go back and open up Interface Builder once again. And we will need to go into the multi-line label and set the value bind to that represented object.text, like that. And for our bottom label, we want to again bind that to the collection view item, change its model key path to represented objects dot created underscore at. We'll save that. Quit this, build and go, and hit fetch. And there we go. We have the username there, we have what their tweet was, and we have the date that it was sent. And of course, you can go into the NS array and use the same sort of model view path that we used to grab this data in code and do with it whatever you want. We won't be talking about that in this episode, but we will in a later episode. Also, coming up in a later episode, we'll be looking at how to customize how the NS view draws itself. Right now, we're just doing an interface builder, which is nice, but you can't draw the sort of custom interface elements that you may want to make it look nicer. Also, we'll be taking a look at interface builder plugins, specifically one called BG HUD App Kit. I believe I got that right. Which includes a bunch of components to make your buttons and scroll views and such blend in better with the HUD window option, because you'll notice Apple didn't include any nice looking buttons to go with their nice looking HUD window. So all those things and more coming up on the next few episodes of Hot Cocoa.